I left the room fully intact. And then when I came back, I literally only had a stump and a couple of fingers. My mum said she felt, this is going to sound rough, she, at the time, her mindset was she would have felt a lot better if the doctors put me down. They made the choice to amputate parts of my fingers while I was still awake. So they were like, if we don't get rid of this baby's fingers, then the meningitis or the blood poison would have reached my heart and completely killed me. So they didn't have time to put me to sleep. So they was just, amputating it on the spot. I don't really talk to this about a lot of people, but I remember my granddad pretty much in front of me asked my mum. Yeah, that stayed with me forever. The fun thing is when I don't like anything or don't like anyone, I just give them the middle finger but with my stump. So I'm just doing that, but in reality I'm just flipping them off the whole time. And they have no idea what I'm doing. Kia ora, my name is Barney Koneferenisi, 28-year-old retired Paralympian, trying to dive into the corporate world of business.
So, mate, you're playing wheelchair rugby. Why? We're talking about what that is and how'd you go, but why did you decide to retire at such a young age?
Just the spark wasn't there. Really. It was I've played since I was 13, 12 years old, and then it's been 10, 11 years. When you first start, you're eager. The travel lures you in, just that lifestyle. But then after 8, 9, 10 years, I was like, well, it's repetition, and I just got bored of it really fast. Then during COVID, my mental health was deteriorating bit by bit, and I felt like I wanted to explore other options. There were more options out there that I wanted to do besides sport.
We will talk about Tokyo and your experience as a Paralympian very soon, but we'd like to go back to the start because also I will tease everybody, one of the funniest ways you found out that you were going to be a Paralympian, the call that you got in the location you got is hilarious and we're looking forward to that. But let's talk about you. Can you tell everybody what your disability is and how were you born with your disability?
Sure. So I was born what society will call a normal child. But when I was 4 months old, I contracted meningitis septicemia. So my blood cells got heavily poisoned, and it literally just ate away my flesh, and just made my body all scarry, bloody, and the doctors didn't have a choice. They made the choice to amputate parts of my fingers while I was still awake. So they were like, if we don't get rid of this baby's fingers, then the meningitis or the blood poison would have reached my heart and completely killed me. So they didn't have time to put me to sleep. So they was just amputating it on the spot.
What?
I still have my baby fingers. My doctors, so we did the X-ray 10, 15 years ago, and they said I still got my baby fingers in there, so I can still move my fingers.
If you don't mind me giving a visual description, Barney, what people, the fingers on my hands, are what, there's 5 fingers, but for you, you've kind of got a ball and underneath the skin, you're moving. Is that the phalanges, like the actual bones?
Yeah.
Is that the tissue fibers? What is moving in the ball? And can you individually move them within that skin?
Yeah. So my doctor did say, because since they cut it off at 4 months, the fingers didn't get a chance to grow. So they're still stuck in baby flesh photo, which is kind of weird, but kind of fun at the same time. Because I'm not sure if you see, but this is my thumb. That's that finger there. That's my middle finger. That little finger and the pinky. So the fun thing is when I don't like anything or don't like anyone, it's I just give them the middle finger, but on my stump. So I'm just doing that, but in reality, I'm just flipping them off the whole time, and they have no idea what I'm doing.
That's
I'm
wild.
so bad.
But just to talk about the immediacy of that surgery, so obviously the doctors have done everything they can and you're alive with us, and that was obviously why they did what they had to do. So, obviously the full process of being in a hospital means that you need an anesthesiologist, you need nursing, care staff. There's such a big procedure to go into, surgery in theatre. That they were like, if we spend 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever that time takes to prep for this surgery, it's going to be too late.
Yeah, seeing as how this was back in the 90s, everything was textbook, and meningococcal or meningitis itself was a very rare disease. So whereas now they have vaccines that can counter that, already have written out things that they need to do if a individual, baby, adult, whoever it was diagnosed with meningitis on the spot, so they know how to counter that. Whereas back in the 90s, like you said, there were so many different procedures, so many different doctors, so many different nurses. They were trying different things on me. I mean, at time, I felt like how do I politely put this? I felt like a science experiment because I just had close to 100, 110 different surgeries over my lifetime, and doctors were just trying random shit on me to see what worked. And then they were like, the screwed up bit was I spent close to 13, 14 years in and out of hospital, and then they just turned around and said, well, none of our 70 surgeries worked, so we're going to have to amputate the rest of your limbs.
So, how did your parents react when they said that you were going to have an operation whilst awake to
So
remove your limbs?
the sad thing was my parents were from the islands, from Samoa, and they knew zero English. And the nurses at that time that were trying to translate to my parents, they were half caste and they didn't know much Samoan as well. And my parents were so under the pump, they had no idea what was going on. So my mum told me. I remember my mum telling me when they took me away, they literally forced me out of the room, put me into a small little dark room. She said, and then she said I left the room. Fully intact, if that makes sense, with my limbs and all that other jazz. And then when I came back in, 4, 8, 9, whatever hours it was, I literally only had a stump and a couple of fingers. But my mum said she she felt this is gonna sound rough, but she at the time her mindset was she would have felt a lot better if the doctors put me down because she saw the amount of pain that I was going through. No matter how much medicine they pumped through my veins, how much bandaging they did, I was just crying nonstop. So she was begging the doctors to put me to sleep because she felt like that was the right thing to do.
I'm glad you didn't. I'm glad you didn't. Good call, not doing it.
Do you know, after having conversations with your mum about what the counter to that was from the doctors to not make that decision, or was that decision ever viable? Did a doctor say like is there, everyone talks about a doctor that kind of stays with them, especially when they spend so much time in hospital. Was there someone who was like, give me a chance to do this, he's in pain now, but there's a brighter future sort of thing? We'll get past this.
I think there was a couple of doctors in that room that were convincing my mum to let live. But I think, thinking back at it, my mum, her mind wasn't in the right place. She was just in the mindset of put me out of pain. I don't want my son to keep suffering like this. When in reality, she wanted to keep me there. But I remember her telling me she had so many different nurses that acted like, how do I say this? You know how when you go into a place and you have a case manager that gives you advice on what to do and they say by doing this, it'll help your future, sort of thing. So there were people like that consoling my mum and telling her that the only way, the putting me down or putting me to sleep um, isn't the only way to counter this. So there were so many people trying to convince her not to put me down, but then there were other people that were doing the exact opposite.
When you were born, man, because I've been lucky. I've been to Samoa before, beautiful country, but hasn't obviously got the greatest resources for people with disability, which was pretty eye opening for me, man. I'm pretty sad to be honest, especially because they don't have the support, say you and I would in New Zealand or in Australia to get mobility aids or whatever it is. After your operation, were you ever going to move back to Samoa and live there, or because that would have been very hard culturally as well? Because I know Samoa's a very tight knit families, but you probably wouldn't have been able to be the best version of yourself if you went back there.
So ideally, my parents were supposed to get deported back to Samoa, um, but I would say luckily. But when I contracted meningitis, um, the doctors were like, after they do your assessments, after all of this stuff, they're like, the chance of Barney go back to Samoa is very nil because, like you said, Dylan, the resources and the support there isn't as good as the support that we have here. So they got granted immediate visa. My parents got immediate visa because they were like, all the medical staff, all the different things that Barney needs are all here. And if we move him back to the islands, it's going to be a lot harder to transfer different files or different medicines back and forth. Whereas if we keep him here, we can just operate on him here. If he falls ill, if he has seizures, he can easily be transported to the hospital and all that other stuff. Um, and just around that, people don't know this, but if you have a disability within the Pacific culture, you're looked at as a letdown or a curse to your family because in the islands, you heavily rely on your child to do the land work. So it's passed down from family. The elders get older, they get weak, they can't lift rocks, they can't build the huts in the islands, and then they pass it down to the kids. We're supposed to cook the food, do the omo, do the cleaning, all the other jazz. And seeing as how Samoa's so inaccessible in the realm of it's just rocks, it's just plain rocks. It's not wheelchair friendly or disabled friendly. We're looked at as dead weight in the family, and we're literally just locked in the house for the whole day, just going insane. Um, at at the moment, it's slowly changing. The mindset towards people with disabilities in Pacific culture is slowly changing. There's a lot of work to do, as most of you guys would know. But at least the conversation is being spoken. I think one of the biggest changes was they had a role model or a model that had Down syndrome on the billboard in Samoa promoting McDonald's. But it's that sort of recognition or that sort of exposure that we need. I remember when I went to Samoa in 2012. I don't really talk to this about a lot of people, but I remember my granddad from my dad's side, pretty much in front of me, asked my mum, when are you going to make another child? Because I'm the oldest in my dad's side, and I've never even met the guy. But we surprise visited, and when he asked that, it really fucked me. I was looking forward to meeting this son of the family, and this is the first thing that comes out of their mouth. I remember we went to the markets to do their shopping, and they didn't want me out of the van. They just said, "Oh, we'll go do the shopping, and he can stay here." And yeah, that stayed with me forever. So it's really hard. It's really hard for me. I like that Samoa is slowly opening their mind towards people with disabilities and they're changing their mindset. But I'm still living with the other side of there's still those people that don't want anything to do. with me or with us in general. And it's really hard to open my mind and change my mindset towards the islands. And people are like, "Oh, you're living the past," but then I was like, there are still moments where I go to family reunions or when I go to my uncle's house and none of my cousins want to talk to me.
Barney, sitting in front of us today, a 28-year-old man, a man who's lived his life, as you know, with disability, with limb difference. Is that a term that you're comfortable with?
Yeah.
A part of your story, which I needed to get into early as possible because there's so much to speak about, and that is you're trialing, you've tried on a $3 million robotic arm.
Yeah, I got it in the cupboard next to me if you want to have a look at it.
Bro,
Cupboard.
get it out.
Get it
I'll
out.
Get it out.
We're just watching Barney walk back and forth past the camera.
Yeah, just out of the wheelchair, just cruising around
Yeah,
trying to find his like $3 million arm.
I put it down under.
Here it is, he's back.
Hang on, it's in a Coles $5 recyclable bag. I expected it to be in like a violin case.
Bro, it's in a Bed Bath & Beyond bag. What the actual hell? Are you kidding?
Here it is.
Oh, geez, I actually didn't expect that.
Tell me how does it work?
So by looks like it does look like, a human hand for all 5 fingers.
It's so funny when I'm on the train and I have my, because when I have my prosthetic appointment, I always take the train to my appointment. And there are so many times because the hand itself doesn't fit in my bag at the bottom. So when I'm pushing, there's literally just a hand hanging out of my bag at the bottom.
Oh,
and the guys
of your Bed Bath & Beyond bag.
and the guys on the train are just staring at me like, why is there a hand hanging out of that, guys?
Oh, God. Looks like you're disposing of a body.
So, bro, talk us through why it's worth $3 million. What does it do?
It's supposed to help with everyday tasks. So it's supposed to help me lift desks, lift things in the car, help me in the kitchen, lift heavy hot pots. So instead of transferring from one place to another, this will grip the pot and then help me lift. It's got a weight excess of, I think, 160 kgs. So that's how much it can take.
What?
That's why it's so expensive.
Wait. So the hand moves?
Does move. So there are sensors in here that picks up the muscles.
Oh, this is genius.
And then the fingers that I showed you. So when I wriggle my fingers, when I clench my fist, it opens the hand, and when I let go, it closes it.
So 160 kilos, that grip power allows you to lift. That's wild. Because when you said lift up a desk, I was like, maybe he's misspoke. No, you're saying you could probably pick up a desk, and then because of the weight balance of it, just use your elbow as sort of like an anchor or a hinge.
Yeah, correct.
And then, wow, that's incredible.
Did you get this on eBay?
It might be used for something else, though. I mean, your partner is.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so I've got 3 questions about this, 3 parts. Firstly, this is for Dylan and both of you. Can we broadly speak about disability technology for a second and the potential profits in this sector? So if a company makes a $3 million robot arm and their profit margin is like 70%, are you feeling a little bit exploited because they're giving assistive technology that is, necessary to you, enabling you to live a full life, but also profiting? I made up that 70% profit margin, I should say. But do you know what I mean? They can charge so much because it is life-changing, and I'll get into sort of funding next.
It's not really, I wouldn't say it's the guys that are making the arm that are profiting. It's the guys that are giving the guys that are making the prosthetics, the software, making the profit. Because most of the time, the guys at the prosthetics place are applying for hundreds of millions of dollars of government funding to get the stuff imported from the States, which is sad to see.
Sort of my example of that was like Big Pharma was like, it cost 3 cents to make a tablet and then they charge $500 for it, right? That's what kind of where my head was at with that.
Profitability sort of thing.
Yeah, I think it's just supply demand. They don't make many of them, so they just charge as much as they can, which probably isn't ideal. They've also got the problem is they've got monopoly on market and patent when they've got the tech. So Big Pharma can't charge $500 a tablet when the patent ends because other people can make it. So I just thought it depends on that. But yeah, look, we want to get to a place where it's obviously more cost effective for everyone to get the better technology for sure.
If that robot arm is subsidised heavily by the government or programs like the NDIS here in Australia, and we don't have to necessarily pay out-of-pocket costs, does that minimise our annoyance at the big profits for that said company? Because it's not, you're not paying $3 million for that arm, so therefore it annoys you less?
Look, it's better if it's not coming out of the pocket of people with disability, but if the tech is a rip-off, you don't want the taxpayer paying either. You know what I mean, Gus? So I think it's a bit of a balance. But look, that's what things like in Australia NDIS or like in New Zealand funding schemes are for, is to make sure that people with disability have equal opportunity, the same as anybody else. And if you've got two arms working, well, then everybody should try and have two arms that work.
I guess one of the main problems that I do have with most of the guys that fund this sort of thing, and I don't mean to sound selfish in any way, but most of the money that comes in from gambling, so it's lotteries, all the other stuff. I completely understand that you'd rather put the money towards something useful, but the fact that they're exploiting and they're encouraging gambling, and when you think about gambling, you think about the negative effects and all that stuff like that. And people in my own culture, 85%, and New Zealand, 85% of people that gamble are Pacific and Māori. And although I do support that the money's going towards sort of things like this, I don't think you know what I mean. I don't think that we should be pushing a bad addiction of gambling or that other stuff towards just to fund this sort of stuff.
Angus, just for your clarity, yeah, in New Zealand and in England and a few other countries, a percentage of gambling profits go to disability sport or disability prosthetics or funding schemes. Yeah. Not in Australia though, mate.
Right. Yeah, so in Australia it's different. Like I learnt very early on from Ashley Morden, one of our previous guests, that, part of my registration for my car, a majority of that goes towards the TAC, which is, if people are involved in car accidents, supporting them with their rehabilitation and all of their needs for the rest of their life. And I was like, oh, that's really awesome. And the NDIS is obviously funding for it here in Australia through the government, putting into the disability sector. That makes sense. I've never heard of gambling profits going into disability. Is that some way we think that they try and justify potentially ruining people's lives by, they're like, yeah, sure, you lost your life savings and your partner's divorcing you, but Barney's got himself $3 million worth of an arm.
Yeah.
But
that's not right.
The counter of it is they don't do it, no one gets wheelchairs. So what would you rather?
Yeah, that is true. But it is also more difficult for you knowing the statistics of your own culture.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Yeah.
My third question is, if there is a budget cap for programs like NDIS and large amounts of investment are going towards assistive technology, like your arm, for example, which I'm all for because obviously it's changed your life and allows you to live the life that you want to be fully fulfilled. Do you get some sort of disability funding jealousy from other people? Is that a thing within the community that someone's like, oh my God, you got the $3 million arm, I've only got, a $10,000 prosthetic, and there's some sort of animosity or something?
I'm not sure if Dylan has gone through this, but there are so many times where, say you have 4 different individuals with amputees. You all have the same amputee, but you have a more upgraded prosthetic than that individual. there are a lot of times where we go to the limb center and then I'm walking in with my blades or my stubbies, and then you have somebody that's been on the waiting list for like 2 or 3 months longer than you, and then they look at their prosthetics and they look at yours and like, why does that person have a better prosthetic than me? And then the prosthesis handling this thing, it's like, oh, that individual's a Paralympian, this and that. They need this to travel the country, or maybe because of their huge social following and they post and they tag us, they can show to their audience what a prosthetic looks like, and then educate them even more. And then the other three individuals that want that prosthetic, I'm not sure if I'd call it jealousy. Maybe it is jealousy. But a lot of them will feel a bit stink that they don't have that certain equipment, and we have it over them.
Yeah, there's also different, like, I know in Australia, two people with the same disability might get two very different mobility aids, just how well they advocate for themselves, Gus. And that's not fair. Just because you're from a better socioeconomic place, went to a better school, speak better, whatever, you get better shit, and it shouldn't be that way.
Let's move on to, we've got two big points of discussion before we let you go, Barney. One is going to be your Paralympic story. I think we've kind of segued into that quite well, about your prosthetics and sort of that difference that it's allowed you to have. And then we'll get into Safe Rides as well, a really important accessibility transport company that you've created. Let's go to the Paralympics. We teased at the start. You've got a hilarious story about how you got the call up to the Tokyo Games. Can you please share that with us?
Sure. So I was just in bed watching TV or playing PlayStation, and I was halfway through my triple cheeseburger when my coach texted me, and he's like, "Hey, you good for a chat?" I looked at it. I was like, "Oh God, I think I know what's happening." And then he called me, and he's like, "Hey, so you might have heard that Captain Leslie pulled out. Yeah, we kind of need you to be his replacement." And then after the chat, I was looking at my cheeseburger, and then looking at the phone, looking at the cheeseburger, and I was like, "Oh." But the guys gave me like 2 months heads up, and I was literally 78 kgs. I was heavy as hell because when I left back in 2018, I just let go of myself. I was just enjoying life. No strict diet, no chicken and rice. I wanted to eat food that I could taste, regardless if I was pushing up the hill and I was heavily breathing. I was about to have a cardiac arrest. I didn't care because at least I could eat chicken nuggets. um, but when I ended up finishing my cheeseburger, but I ate it a lot slower because it was so much guilt, and I still had French fries left over as well. I just chucked the French fries out.
I ate it slowly because I was filled with guilt. Great.
But it was a good cheeseburger. It was a
Triple cheeseburger,
bro.
that's gangster. Knocking around.
But it's, when I started training, I had to blow the cobwebs off the slam ball and the weights because it hasn't been touched for years. After doing 2 reps, I was done. I walked straight back up the ramp and I just laid back in bed. But it was fun. It was the good part was my gut because it was so big. It worked my advantage because I could hold the ball better. So when nobody could strip the ball off me, because I used my gut to push the ball against the ball holder, and then when they stripped me, it just literally just stayed there.
It's good. Hey, man, one thing I love about New Zealand, Maori, Samoan culture is the haka. And I love it that in wheelchair rugby, it is still done. Can you explain what it means to you to do it, but also for listeners who haven't seen it, how the hell do you do that in a wheelchair?
So the haka is a war dance. It was some, I would say, created by the Māori to scare away the British during the colonization period. So if you hear yelling and you saw all the actions, they will somehow put fear into the opposition, and that's what we normally do. Before a game, you saw the All Blacks do it when they played the Wallabies. They would just stare down and then just say the haka, do the actions. I'm not sure if they still do the throw cut. I tried doing it in Tokyo, but I got told off by the coach. Um, but we're just doing that in the wheelchair is so much better because as an able body, you got to hit your thighs. But when you're a paraplegic, you can't really feel your thighs. But so when you sit down in the chair and just hit the wheels as hard as you can, and you can hear the guard hitting against the spokes, and it just makes that rattling noise. Um, we have a lot of tetraplegics in the team when they do the haka, although they can't hit the wheels really hard, you can just see in their eyes how hungry they are. One of the best parts of the haka is because I'm a bit of a show off, I'm a bit of a diva. So I've always, me and Hayden, one of my main teammates, always in the front, and we're just going crazy. And then I watch the replays, and I'm doing the haka completely wrong. Because the last time I did the haka was 2015, and then I was like, since when was that he? I thought that was he. And then I watched it back, and I was like, oh, you idiot. But I remember after the haka in Tokyo, I completely lost my voice. So the only way I could communicate with my teammates was through sign language, and they were like, why aren't you talking? And they're like, I lost my voice, I can't talk anymore.
I hear that. I like it.
And safe rides as well, Barney. It's a huge part of the reason that you're on this show. It's something very close to your home. You're now a tech startup entrepreneur yourself. It's not available here in Australia. Fingers crossed it will be one day. But can you please explain the movement you're making in New Zealand?
Yeah, absolutely. So the birth of the idea of safe rides first came to me in 2013 when I was studying, and I called for a wheelchair accessible van. And they said, I'm sorry, this is not available. And then, well, I didn't take any notice of it, and I just took the bus home. But then it got even worse when I was in 2016, when I was at uni. And I went from a smaller chair to a bigger chair. And regardless, even though the big chair could fold and collapse, the axle was rusted into the wheel, into the chair. And so the driver couldn't pull it out. And he said the only option for you is to get a wheelchair accessible van to counter your chair not being able to go into small cars. So me being ignorant, I had an 8 o'clock class, and I called for a wheelchair accessible van. I called the first company, and they said, "Oh, I'm sorry, all our vans booked up school runs." I called the second company, said the same thing. I went through 23 different companies. Ended up missing my lecture. I got a bad grade for that regard, even though I explained it to my lecturer. He didn't want any bit of it. But then the story changed when I got a smaller chair. Had my assessment, I got a smaller chair, and then I started taking Ubers. I was like, "Oh, I can use Uber Assist. It'll be helpful." And then I realized I booked the car 2 hours before my lecture, and then I checked the time. I was like, "Oh, I have 30 minutes to my lecture. Why hasn't my car arrived?" And then I just saw on the digital receipts back to back to back to back cancellations. And the driver, I think the mindset was, it's rush hour. I don't want to get out of my car and put wheelchairs in cars. So a year and a half after that, I stopped using Ubers and I started using trains. And then I released a survey. I was like, I reached out to disabled organizations, and I was like, "Oh, can you?" One of my questions was, "Have you ever been discriminated against or felt uncomfortable in the car?" And we had close to 600 respondents. Maybe 75 to 80 something percent said they have been discriminated against by taxi companies and Uber companies. And three different results from females saying that they've been sexually assaulted by their taxi driver. So what they do is, when you're in a van, they strap you down in the van. So we have a lot of male drivers strapping females, wheelchair users, into the van, and when they put their belt on, they're touching them inappropriately, or when they're putting their chest belt on, they're feeling certain areas. That was pretty much the birth of Safe Roads. I was like, if I can, in some way, offer wheelchair accessible vehicles during 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. when they're not available. That'll get wheelchair users or people with larger chairs out of their homes. If we can implement a training sector where if we have people that drive hybrids and say, oh, you're picking up Dylan will have a wheelchair, that eliminates the anxiety between the wheelchair user and the driver, because at this moment, there's no transparency between all two parties. You just get the name and get the location, and then you're just sitting there thinking, is my driver going to show up? If we have a female on the platform, they can order a female-only driver. That'll hopefully help them feel safer during the ride. Then we have the pets and then elderly, all the other jazz as well. So at the moment, we've got 12 vans on standby, 12 individuals with vans, spinal cord guys that are happy to bring their van out to us, and we're going to get that scattered all over Auckland. We have 250 hybrid drivers that are willing to jump on board and transport people with different disabilities. And within the 250 drivers, I think 112 drivers are happy to have service animals and guide dogs in their cars, because there's a lot of turned down rides because of that. I think we have at least 85 to 90 female drivers already on the platform, ready to go, which is good. So we have the drivers, we have the vans, we have all the other jazz, registered company, we've got the licenses. The only thing that is slowing us down at the moment is the development of the app. Because regardless, if we have the drivers, if we don't have an app, then that's pretty much a business that we can't launch.
ChatGPT-4, mate. Just type it in, bang, create you an app, get going, mate. It's amazing work what you're doing.
Thank you.
You know, obviously, once it gets to these shores, we'll be promoting it as well. It's a great idea, and like you said, 79% of respondents being turned down rides because of their disability from your 600 plus respondents is just not good enough. So we love the work you're doing, mate, and we're obviously going to promote that on Listenable across our socials as well. But before you go, Barney, we do a bowl of uncomfortable. This is a question that we get sent through, sometimes anonymous, sometimes, from people who are happy to ask you the questions from our socials. Dylan, what's yours?
It is from Emily. She's 4 years old on our Facebook. She asks, how do you eat a cheeseburger? Doesn't it fall out because you got no hands?
Believe it or not, I still have a full palm. But there are so many times where I unwrap the burger and I use my stump as a table. So I hold it like this, and then I grab it with the little fingers that I have, and I just munch around it. So depending how big the burger is. If it's a cheeseburger, I'll just eat it in one bite.
Yeah, but you're bloody eating triple cheeseburgers.
That's our episode, mate. We can't thank you so much for your time. Of course, we can find you at It's Barney with 3 A's and 2 E's on Instagram. Of course, just head to our Instagram right now. You'll see him tagged across a bunch of posts over the next few weeks and beyond. And of course, at safe_rides_NZ is really where we want to get the followers over there to keep up to date with your great work in this space, mate. And we wish you all the best. And if there's anything we can do, just holler at us because we're always here for you.
Go on you, Barney.
Thank you so much, guys. I appreciate it. Thank you.